How doing, everybody? It's your guy Wardy here, and we have plenty of reports and plenty news and rumblings to get into in Mets land. As folks, there's just 3 games left to decide this New York Mets team and their playoff fate. We're going to expand more on the playoff format for the Mets as of now, what they need to do to officially secure postseason play over teams like the Cincinnati Reds and to a lesser degree the Arizona Diamondbacks. We're also going to get into the very exciting news that we've headlined on the platform over the past calendar week, and now looks like it is officially coming to fruition. Dylan Ross is getting the call for this Miami Marlins series, so we're going to break down Dylan Ross, the flame-throwing right-handed rookie reliever, and yes, we have a lot of positives to say on his front as to what he provides to this Mets team and how he could help them potentially heading into postseason play. From there, we're going to talk more on the greatness as of late, which is Francisco Lindor, and how vital he has been in stepping up as of late on this road trip for this New York Mets team, along with everything else in between, while we're going to wrap up the show to give you a complete deep dive of a series preview, our final series preview of the calendar 2025 season, this time against those Miami Marlins in Miami. Hit that like and subscribe button on your way in, everybody, as we have a lot of breakdown of Mets land. This comes just after securing a massive series victory this past night against the Chicago Cubs. So in case you guys did not check out our post-game coverage this past night on the platform, by the time this video is dropping, make sure you do so after watching this one, as we had a lot to say. Emotions were riding high in the best way possible in that 8-5 victory, along with what you guys can do, which is heading over to the Bleacher Report app, type in Mets, and you're going to come across a recap from yours truly as I recap every single Mets game for Bleacher Report across a 2 to 3 minute format. Click on that video if you guys want a nice little summary of what happened this past night, but if you want the long form version, head over back to that, as I mentioned, there on the YouTube channel here, and watch the live stream whenever you guys have interest to do so and time. But folks, we got a lot to get into in this one, so hit those buttons on your way in, and shout out to our amazing sponsors that make today's show happen, that being at SeatGeek, that has you covered for all of your ticketing needs. You guys know the drill by now, but if not, make sure you utilize our promo code WARDY10, because you're going to save some dough, and you're going to save 10% off your next ticket purchase there, whether it's for Mets tickets, if you're a Mets fan that lives in Florida and wants to hit that final series of the year there in Miami, whether you're an NFL fan that's trying to get ahead for this next upcoming weekend of games, whether you're an NHL fan and the preseason mix of things, the NBA season right around the corner, whatever you need in the ticketing space, SeatGeek has you covered, as well as Manta Sleep, the best sleep mask in the game, but we will get into them later on in today's show. First and foremost, everybody, let's just talk about the obvious. What has been the obvious? And that has been the step up of Francisco Lindor and Brett Baty. As we highlighted in our past night's post-game show, Brett Baty and Francisco Lindor headline, in my opinion, 2 of the bigger standouts that we saw in this past night's 8-5 victory, and especially starting with Francisco Lindor. I cannot understate this enough, everybody, emphasize this enough, rather. What Lindor has done on this past couple days of a road trip has been massive. It's been vital. As we all said, heading into this series, heading into the final stretch of games for the Mets this year, if they get anywhere where they want to be, which is most certainly postseason play, because as we take a current look at them, the Mets are just 1 full game up right now on the Cincinnati Reds. So there's a lot at stake as we get into these final 3 games against the Marlins that we're going to preview a little bit later on the show. But what holds true is Francisco Lindor entered this series against the Cubs at Wrigley Field with an OPS around 667 and a batting average of just 211, just over the Mendoza line on the road this year. Lindor has been one of the most Jekyll and Hyde hitters for the Mets at home versus on the road this season. So to see him step up with not 1 but 2 massive home runs in this series, in which the Mets won both those games, Game 1 and Game 3 of said series. And you remember that long streak the Mets had where they won every single game that Lindor homered in for what felt like at least 30 straight? You know, there's a reason for that, and that's because how valuable Lindor is, not only as a player, as a batter, but most certainly as a leader for this team. And, you know, while it's been cliche in the past, it's held true. This Mets team, without question, rides through and through Francisco Lindor. Even with everything that Juan Soto has done greatly this season, which has honestly been the best offensive season in Mets team franchise history. Kind of a big deal for his first year on that 15-year contract. But what's also a big deal is to see Lindor stepping up in the clutch down the stretch here when the Mets need him most. So say what you will about the inconsistencies that come with a guy like Lindor, what also holds true is that this is most certainly someone that has shown time and time again his ability and his willingness to step up even when he hasn't otherwise performed all that well in previous weeks, whatever the case may be. Hopefully, this trend continues into that big matchup against the Miami Marlins, as would be the case, hopefully, with Brett Baty, because Brett Baty entered that series at Wrigley Field with an OPS of 570 on the road, batting below the Mendoza line on the road. Beatty in the second half this season has an OPS around 850, batting north of 300. But on the road, he still has been very fickle in what you're getting. To see Beatty have a 3-run opposite field bomb, lefty off of Shulte Managa was nothing short of impressive. And his defense, the bat-to-ball skills, everything about Beatty has proven us by now that he is the go-to man as our everyday third base option. We felt this way for months on end this season, yet it's taken Carlos Mendoza potentially this long to finally figure it out. I digress. I know we got 3 games left to spare on the season, so I won't go too heavy in on him there. What's also true here is that Francisco Alvarez, even without starting in Game 3 of that matchup against the Cubs, was, in my opinion, the most valuable batter for the Mets in this series outside of Francisco Lindor. Alvy's big home run that he secured to give the Mets that 9-7 victory in Game 1, his second home run there in Game 2, which I understand the Mets did not win, but wasn't for a lack of effort on Alvy's end, who has a partially torn UCL in his right thumb that requires surgery at the end of the season, has a broken left pinky in his hand. So when you look at everything that's been going on with Alvarez and his ailment, and he was so beat up at the end of Game 2, that's why he got the day off per Carlos Mendoza. Thankfully, the Mets didn't need to rely on him when he has 5 home runs in 7 career games at Wrigley Field. He's raked against that Cubs team in Wrigley, but Francisco Alvarez is a guy where if he's not in the lineup, there has to be a justified reason for it, which is why I honestly didn't give Mendy flack at much at the time, nor am I giving it to him now, because the Mets didn't need him, as Luis Torrens was more than competent, caught a really good game for McLean. Outside of a couple of ding-dongs of home runs, Nolan still had himself a tremendous ball game that we all saw, that we broke down thoroughly this past night, as McLean had himself 11 strikeouts, a new career high, the most strikeouts by any Mets starter this season. Rookie or veteran, it does not matter. McLean has been that man. And even though he did give up 5 earned runs, it really goes in him what was a really good season, a really good start to his young career for McLean, who as of now is the Mets Game 1 wildcard starter, should they in fact secure postseason play when everything is said and done here. But even with Nolan giving up the most runs in an outing in his young career, he still looked utterly dominant in more ways than one. So I'm not going to really look at that much more than saying he was a little tired towards the end, got a little gas, and Seiya Suzuki made him pay with his second homer on the ball game there. But folks, that's kind of my big summary of takeaways from this series. Francisco Lindor, Brett Beatty, guys who have not stepped up on the road, need to continue to do so, because what has held true with both these guys is that they have been key focal points in the Mets and their offensive production, not just throughout the season, but especially in the second half. Beatty, as I mentioned, has been fantastic in the second half, fully warranted of being an everyday player for you. And knowing that the pitching gauntlet the Mets have upcoming against the Marlins, that being in Edward Cabrera, Sandy Alcantara, and Yuri Perez, all right-handers, there is no justified reason to not have Brett Beatty starting every single game at third base in this series. And if I see Mark Vientos start one single game at third base, I'm going to want to pull my hair out. Not a slight on Mark, just a matter of fact, Brett Beatty's a proficient defender, and Mark Vientos is arguably the worst third baseman in all of baseball, looking at defense alone. Not accounting for his bat, because we know he can produce, even though that itself has been far from consistent the past 2.5+ weeks. But now, folks, talking about things that we have seen at the major league level, let's talk about what we will see at the major league level, as we have very exciting news. In case you guys did not see it, unofficially official at this point in time, but we're going to be seeing it become official in the next 24 hours or so. And that is all headline here from what you guys can see along with me from Mike Puma of the New York Post, reaffirming what Gary Cohen initially had mentioned briefly on the broadcast in the series finale against the Cubs. And that is as follows, everybody. You guys see it, I see it. Let's talk about it together. We talked about this right in hand in our live stream yesterday. Shortly after is when Puma tweeted this, so perfect timing. Dylan Ross is under consideration to join the Mets as soon as Saturday in Miami. The Mets view Ross as a possible mid-leverage option from the bullpen, who is potentially a better version of Ryan Stanek. Ross dominated with a 1.69 ERA across 28 appearances for Syracuse. So, a couple things I have to say right away, as you guys can watch the oh-so-nice Dylan Ross highlights in the process here in just one second, everybody, once I pull them up, because I pulled up the McLean ones for a second there by accident. That was not my initial intention. What my intention is to show you, however, Dylan Ross carving up some batters that you guys will see. This was some highlights there from earlier this season. And Ross, who's been obviously in AA, now in AAA for this Mets team, has been universally deemed for a while now as the best reliever option, not named Ryan Lambert, that they currently have in the farm. Lambert, who's a flamethrowing right-hander in his own right, smaller stature, and has looked brilliant in AA, helping the Rowa Ponies win the AA championship this year. So congratulations to them. Very exciting, as was the case with High A Brooklyn winning as well. Mets farm just killed it all year long. And Dylan Ross was a key factor as to why in his own regard, because not only was Ross just jaw-droppingly good that we saw at every minor league level this year, but once he got up to Syracuse, outside the walk rate, which definitely fluctuated a lot for him, he was just striking at batters left, right, and center. Still a K per 9 healthy and well over a 10 K per 9. The walk rates is what's fluctuated a lot with him that we have seen from AA to AAA. Was walking everybody and their mother initially, but calmed down a lot. And as someone who witnessed Dylan Ross in person, the 25-year-old rookie right-hander who's getting set for his debut as early as this Saturday against the Miami Marlins in Miami, I can tell you, I saw him in person this past week, front row in the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs Stadium against the Iron Pigs. He had himself a squirrel sitting and struck out at least one, if not two. He looked brilliant. He looked exactly like the kind of arm that I think this Mets team has been longing for in their bullpen. I think it's kind of fitting that now that we finally are giving Dylan Ross an opportunity, it's coming at the exact same time that both Ryan Helsley and Ryan Stanek are proving to be competent for you in your bullpen. Stanek has gotten the job done in his previous outings. We've seen Ryan Helsley have 6 scoreless outings now that we have seen, 6 scoreless innings at least, including 2 scoreless innings in what was a defeat for the Mets in Game 2, losing 10-3 against the Cubs. But it wasn't for a lack of effort by Ryan Helsley's end. He looked good, and that's more what we want to see. Listen, the whole reason as to why David Stearns acquired Tyler Rogers, Gregory Soto, and Ryan Helsley was for the whole purpose to help compensate a bad rotation for a really, really good bullpen. I think what we're seeing now is that finally coming to fruition. It's taken north to 2 months since the deadline, so that in itself is a problem, but the Mets are finally starting to get stability in their bullpen that stepped up mightily that we saw in their series finale this past day. As you guys can see right here, right now, look at Ryan Stanek. Look what he did. Brooks Raley, a dog, so happy he's under club control for 2026 as the Mets have a club option. Love to see it. Tyler Rogers bringing him back as well, and Edwin Sugar Diaz being oh so dominant, as he was my pitcher of the series, as he had 2 saves, 3 dominant innings, and had himself 5 strikeouts across 6 batters in that Game 1 victory for the New York Mets against the Cubs. But the bullpen has been stellar. So the fact that Dylan Ross is getting consideration now is interesting. Why would the Mets consider Dylan Ross now at the major league level when they've had the past month and a half to do so when he still looked really good, walk rate aside? And the simple answer to this is, and shout out to Tim Britton of The Athletic for enlightening me on this, as Tim does a great job along with Wolf Salmon covering the Mets on the beat for The Athletic. He came out with an article approximately a week ago, the last time that we broke down Dylan Ross extensively on the platform, because remember that video on report, Mets to call up Dylan Ross, question mark? It was a question mark then, but now it is most certainly pretty much a certainty, which is exciting because as Tim highlighted in his article, he said that the only reason why the Mets hadn't called up Dylan Ross sooner at this point is because he has been dealing with a blister. And once that blister gets fully healed up, or at least to the liking of the Mets, he will be sure to get the call. And that has now held true, everybody. That blister has healed up to a degree. That's enough and sufficient for the Mets to say, hey, it's time to give you the call, Dylan, because Dylan Ross looks like he could really be a force to be reckoned with in this Mets bullpen. He looks like the kind of guy that if he can get these walks settled, he could be the Mets' best right-handed option in their bullpen outside of what I think really should be and will be Ryan Helsley. I cannot tell you guys enough how good of a pitcher Ryan Helsley is. And to see Helsley fix himself as much as he has, going from a guy with 11 ERA because of tipping pitches, looking so not comfortable on the mound, going from being a St. Louis Cardinal through and through to now being a big market with the Mets out of a closer role for the first time in his career. That's a big adjustment for a guy who led all baseball and saves a season ago. So naturally, Helsley getting beat around a bit, not looking good. Mets not DFAing him because they know the value's still there. That's why they trade for him even as a rental. And what Helsley has been able to do over his past stretch of games has been brilliant. I hope we see more of that so he can be a reliable option come postseason play should the Mets get there. But knowing that there's uncertainty and knowing the Mets need arms and knowing you have no clue the kind of length that you're getting from your rotation this weekend. Brandon Sproat's towing the rubber Game 1, but it's a complete coin flip as to what's happening Games 2 and Game 3. It's going to be more of a bullpen gauntlet barring changes than anything else with Sean Manaea and Clay Holmes yet again utilized. Now the questions will be for the better. We'll talk about that in a little bit. What we're here to talk about right here, right now is Dylan Ross, who currently, as we take a look at his AAA numbers, has 11 K per 9 to his 6 walks per 9. Does have a 1.69 ERA, a 3.62 FIP. Expected FIP that isn't that great, but again, AAA numbers, we'll see how he transitions to the major league level. Now, for Mets fans that may say to themselves, Wardy, why are the Mets giving Dylan Ross an opportunity when these are do or die games for the Mets? And while I understand the rightful concern, my counter is because of that upside. The fact that Ross should have been up here at least a week and a half and not 2 weeks ago, but the blister really held him back, I think is telling of all. Dylan Ross looks like a near certainty of someone who can come in and at his best be one of the best reliever options the Mets have based on velocity and location alone. Now, how does he transition to his major league level debut against the Marlins this Saturday? We'll soon find out. He may get rocked. He may not handle the pressure. He might be tipping his pitches like Helsley for all we know. But until we see what exactly those results are going to be, we just have to talk about what we know about him to this point. And we know he's a flame-throwing option that can easily touch. We're getting north of 102 on the gun. Dylan Ross has some really, really sneaky velocity, and he's got a towering frame. So it isn't overly shocking when he sees another big body towering right-hander in this bullpen, along with Stanek, along with Helsley. And Helsley, we know how yoked he is as is. But the idea that the Mets have Ross, and if he does perform well, then it really opens up what is a great question as to what do you do come postseason play should you get there. Because Tim did relay in his article from this past week that the Mets may very well make him then go either way to have him available on their postseason roster if he performs well. So this is clearly in hand with the Mets having a high upside belief that Dylan Ross can come in here and be a high leverage option for them. If not right away, then close to. Maybe after one low leverage option against Miami, he leads into a high leverage option a couple days later against, I don't know, the Dodgers in LA in game 1 or game 2 of the wild card. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But for now, Dylan Ross, why have Mets fans been saying to me, Wardy, why are the Mets now calling up Dylan Ross yet? Going all the way back to June. And that has been because naturally, David Stearns is going to wait until he feels that every box has been checked off. While the walk rates have not been sexy, knowing that the blister has been the main thing to hold him back tells me the Mets have clearly been wanting him at the big league level for at minimum the past calendar week, if not 2 weeks, if not more. So I'm excited to see him. I'm really intrigued to see how he's going to perform. I get it. It's a do or die situation, so you don't love that, but I think the simple counter, like anything else, is you give him a quick leash. If Ross looks like he's shaking in his boots and looking like Jonathan against Jacob deGrom Friday or so ago that we saw where he couldn't even get out of the first inning, should that happen, make the proper move, get him out there fast. But if he's getting quick swing and misses, if he's getting guys that clearly look late on his fastball, then you're doing something right and you want to keep him in that ball game, at least for that point in time. So, Dylan Ross, everybody, I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. What's your thoughts on the Mets preparing to call up their young flamethrower right-hander again at the age of 25? Plenty upside here with Dylan Ross, who now will get an opportunity with the Mets at the end of the season, as well as potential postseason play. You know, there's one big takeaway I have from this, is that this further reaffirms what Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns have reiterated the past 2 weeks, which is, you know, track record means nothing. This is me talking here. Track record is fickle when we look at the veteran options of this team, because the veteran options have proven their inability to be consistent here for the vast majority of the season, i.e. Kodai Senga, David Peterson, to a degree Clay Holmes, even though he's been a lesser liability than others, most certainly a liability in Sean Manaea, among others. So the Mets have been needing some type of stability to get going here when it comes to their pitching staff, but they're looking for just the best options right now. Doesn't matter if you were an ace caliber starter like a Kodai Senga. As of now, Kodai looks like someone that the Mets are so tongue-tied as to what they should do with, because he underwhelmed in his bullpen at Port St. Lucie the other day, was sitting 93 on the gun. You think that's going to bode well if he then makes his return and, say, a bullpen outing for the first time this year in LA against the Dodgers? Why won't it be batting practice like what we saw him do in the NLCS last year against the same Dodgers club? You know, I'm not overly confident about that, and it sucks because Senga, you know, has so much value for this team, but given how much he's at times, and I don't mean this personally, just a matter of fact, he can be a mental midget where he really gets in his own head and he's very meticulous, which goes and actually hurts his game at times. I don't know what the future is for Kodai Senga, but right now is a complete coin flip. If he's utilized, could he be called up for this series? Could he be utilized in this series against the Miami Marlins? It's definitely possible, especially if the Mets, say, have a bad game with Sproat or a bad game too, and you need arms available. This is what the Mets are doing now. It's whoever looks like immediately their best options. Dylan Ross, Brandon Sproat, Noel McLean, to a lesser degree, Jonathan. What these guys have in common, they're all very exciting young right-handers that help impact this Mets team now for the most part, and greater than what we have seen with a lot of guys who have not only been here this season, but have been around the game for a while and just have completely rolled over it and died for the most part in the second half, especially David Peterson, who clearly looks like a guy who should be done pitching this year, who's handling the largest workload he's ever had in his career, innings-wise, and has not been able to handle it at all here in the second half, really, since the month of June. So, to go on from that, to talk about Dylan Ross, everybody, let's talk more on playoff format, Marlins preview, and a bit more on just what are other things the Mets may be able to consider when it comes to making roster moves with the final series ahead against these Marlins. Let's get into it, everybody. But before we do get into it and before we talk about all that, let's also hear a quick word from our amazing sponsor today at Manta. Listen, Mets fans, as much as I love making content for you guys, something that can definitely be a struggle is getting proper sleep at night, especially when I'm working late to give you guys content to drop in the AM. I'm just hoping to get some semblance of sleep, but unfortunately that doesn't happen at the times I want it to because the sunlight is constantly poking in my eyes when I'm just trying to sleep in maybe an extra hour or two. Well, folks, no longer is that the issue, and I'm very grateful to announce our amazing sponsor on the platform, that being at Manta Sleep Mask, everybody, because I've been repping their sleep mask for a number of years now since I've worked with them in the past, and they have been an absolute game changer. When it comes to getting comfortable sleep at night, look no further. As long as you have your Manta mask, you're going to be good to go. And what I mean by this, everybody, just take a look. This is the Manta Mask Pro that I've been using for literally 2.5 to 3 years now. I use this as much as possible almost every single night. I kid you not, I had a bad sleep 2 nights ago because I left it downstairs and I didn't have it in my bedroom. So I usually wake up and kind of keep it on my head because it's comfortable for me personally for my first couple hours. I know I'm a weirdo, but that's okay. But not only do I love the fact that their technology makes it so easy to have no sunlight whatsoever getting in your face when you're repping these, but their cups that you guys see back here, you can take them off and you can properly adjust them any which way that is best for you and your face alignment. So when it comes to comfortability, there's nothing even close to as good as what I've experienced with our great friends here at Manta Mask. And as you guys can head over to mantasleep.com, check out their products for yourself because they don't just have the Sleep Mask Pro that I'm currently repping that helps so much not only the comfortability, especially when I'm sleeping on my side. Other ones are just way too bulky when I've used other products separate from Manta, but they have been a game changer. And as you guys can see, they have a plethora of options, not just their current Pro Mask that you guys see right there that I currently have. They also have the Sound Mask Next Gen, which gets raving reviews because I'm one of those guys that needs fan noise at night to sleep. And when I'm doing road trips especially, or let's just take it back a couple years ago when I visited my buddy Borna out in San Diego, I need a good, nice, comfortable sleep. He gave me his sound mask to utilize when I was sleeping on his couch, and I slept like a baby because I was just running a fan noise that, again, is Bluetooth, mind you, in that mask, and is so comfortable, not a problem, and even has some weight to it, which I personally like there to get a nice sleep. You also have the silk mask here, their normal sleep mask as well, and the list goes on and on. They have ones for kids. They have a weighted mask that you guys can see down here. They have a cooling mask if you want your face to be a little bit cool at night. Maybe it's the contrary, you want a steam mask for your face. So all in all, when it comes to sleep mask, our great friends at Manta Sleep have you covered, everybody. So do yourself a favor, save some dollars on your next purchase with our great friends at Manta Sleep by simply heading over to mantasleep.com and utilizing our promo code WARDY. That way you too are going to be getting 10% off your purchase. Shout out to Manta Sleep, as always, for being an amazing sponsor on the platform. All right, folks, so let's start by talking about playoffs, right? Playoffs? What do you mean playoffs, right? That's a line that we've said countless times here in the second half because the Mets being a team 21 games above 500 and now relying on just the final semblance of that 21-game lead to dictate them making postseason play has not been ideal for a Mets team that's been a bottom 5 worst in baseball since mid-June this year, quite literally over half a season now. But in that same breath, we can also say that they're still right in the heart of it. They're still right in the thick of it. And there's one thing that's so fascinating about postseason play is that it truly does not matter all that much what you may be doing in the regular season to dictate how you perform when it matters most in the clutch. How many times have we seen teams go on fantastic runs as that third and final wildcard spot since the expanded format, including our New York Mets last year? Now, granted, the Mets were playing far superior baseball all summer long leading into making postseason play, but they still needed the final day of the season, an extra day, that doubleheader where themselves and the Braves split it to kick the D-backs out of it. Hopefully the Mets can kick the D-backs officially out of it in the next 24 hours or so, barring changes, because as we go back to that playoff format, as I mentioned right now, the Mets, in a year where somehow, some way, the American League has actually been deeper in their playoff configuration with that third wild card than the National League for the first time since its conception of beginning this playoff format. We have seen the Mets, though, on pace at absolute most can secure 85 wins this season. And here's the thing, 85 wins and the Mets are guaranteed to be in the postseason. 84 wins, Not so fast, because the Cincinnati Reds do have a very tall task this weekend, and what is obviously a do-or-die series for them. But they're in Milwaukee against one of the best teams, if not the best team in all baseball, at home this season, in said Brewers. So that is something that you say to yourself, okay, that's good. You like that on paper. We'll see if it turns out in the Mets' favor in the end here. But for the Mets, going into Miami will be no easy task whatsoever. The Marlins just got bounced from being in postseason contention still, which shows you how similarly close the Mets and the Marlins are this year. Who had that on their bingo card heading into the season? Yeah, the Atlanta Braves would be the worst team out of that bunch. Like, who had that? I really want to know. If you did, you're crazy. You're smoking something past it here, though, because clearly it's strong enough to get your day through. But going back to this, the New York Mets now at absolute most can secure 85 wins. So when we talk about playoff format, what do the Mets need to do? It's as simple as this, everybody. The Mets need to either win out or they need to win 2 out of 3 and hope that that is still more victories than what you're getting in the Reds. The good news is that there's a reality where the Mets could head into their Sunday series finale matchup against the Marlins and have nothing to worry about. They could be completely locked in then. And that's the best case scenario. That's what we're all hoping and praying for, that the Reds somehow continue their losing ways, are bounced, are officially eliminated by the time we get to Saturday or so at some point. And then Sunday, the Mets are playing with house money, can throw whoever they want as a pitcher out there, not have to hurt too many of their arms before getting set for that wild card series in LA that'll begin this Tuesday, barring changes. So that's the ideal world we want to find ourselves in. But if it isn't going to be that, then this is where things get a bit more sweaty, because as we talked briefly earlier, the Arizona Diamondbacks are 2 games out. In order for Arizona to secure this playoff spot, they need to win out. The Reds need to lose out, and the Mets need to lose out. That's the only way basically it happens. The Reds, though, if they win 2 out of their next 3, and the Mets only win 1 out of their next 3, then the Mets will be mathematically eliminated from postseason play, because unfortunately they will then be tied with the Reds, which means the Reds will have that tiebreaker going back to when the Reds, yes, you guessed it, beat the Mets in 2 out of 3 games in Cincy around 2 weeks ago. That's why that series was so vital then. That's why it could come back to bite them in the you-know-what right now. But it's imperative for the Mets to go out here and to continue their winning ways like they did against the Cubs. It would be great if they could sweep Miami, but when was the last time the Mets swept Miami in Miami? It feels like it's been a very long time, right? Especially knowing that the Marlins can play spoiler here. Regardless of them being officially eliminated from postseason play, knowing that they can play spoiler is exactly why every fan should be rightfully concerned. Because Sandy Alcantara is towing the rubber game 1 against Brandon Sproat, and Sandy has carved up the Mets all season long. And the 2 starts in which Sandy Alcantara faced the Mets this year, he had plenty of success. And Sandy is not the only one who's had success against this Mets team when we evaluate these rotation matchups. But there's one thing that's going at least a little bit in the Mets' favor is, one, Brandon Sproat didn't even look that bad his last start. He was done 4 innings, 4 earned runs, 70 pitches, but that's because Jose Siri, who's no longer with us because he's been DFA'd by the Mets, who I haven't gotten a chance to really speak much on. I like Jose Siri. I wish him well, but it just wasn't going to work out, obviously. When you become a defensive liability, when your only role on this team is to play good defense and to be a good base runner because we know you can't hit a beach ball, that's a problem that you cost Brandon Sproat not 1 but 2 runs in his previous matchup. That still pisses me off from that game against the Nationals, because Siri at minimum should have made at minimum 1 of those plays. And the fact that he didn't, the fact that all those runs got charged on Sproat and he was out of there in just 70 or so pitches really frustrates me, because the Mets don't have any quality in the rotation outside Nolan McLean at all. It's literally in shambles. Doesn't change the fact that they just won the series. It's still most certainly in shambles. So Brandon Sproat's someone that we've seen electrify early, and we need to see him dominate against a great veteran starter in Sandy Alcantara, who knows how to step up against this Mets team. A pitcher that a lot of Mets would love to see in this rotation heading into 2026. So don't be surprised if you see some trade rumblings happening there that we'll discuss this offseason plenty. Game 2 is Yuri Perez, who can be dominant, but the Mets actually kicked the teeth in a bit last time they faced. Really good, as a matter of fact, at Citi Field. They also did the same with Edward Cabrera. But here's the problem. The Mets curb stomped these starters at Citi Field. They were unable to do so necessarily on the road nearly as much. And when we look back to that series, crazy enough, even with the Mets beating up on Perez, beating up on Cabrera, they still lost 3 out of 4 games in that series at home. So there's a lot at stake here, not just because you're playing the Marlins, but because you're facing the 3-headed monster, which is their top starters in the rotation. Guys who know this Mets lineup well, know this team well, know what it means to play spoiler and how exciting and enthralling that would be for them, knowing that this would be their World Series, right? So for the Mets, they have to go out here and they have to pounce early and often. They have to continue the trend of what we saw in Game 1 and Game 3 of the series. You need early offense. If the Mets wait until, say, Brandon Sproat's out of the ball game after maybe giving you 5 rock-solid innings at least, and then the bullpen gets rocked a little bit, who knows the type of, retaliation we're going to get from this lineup. Not that they can't go ahead and do it, because they proved us all wrong in Game 1 of that series against the Cubs. For the first time this season, the Mets rallied back 5 runs down. Very impressive. And that's what I've been telling you guys for the past north of a month now. If the Mets want to do anything special this year, if they want to have a magical run, they have to deviate away from the baseball that they played all year. And they have to win games in dramatic fashion. They have to actually break the ice, which is losing beyond the 8th inning, in which they're currently 0-67 this year. That's the kind of thing that I honestly hope and I'm longing to see happen in this series. I rather the Mets have a sweaty ball game in one of these 3 games against the Marlins and win it by coming back in the 9th inning, probably more than I would want anything else when it comes to the type of victories. And the reason for that is, as heart palpitating as I may sound, you want that kind of victory for the Mets to build off of, to potentially go into postseason play with. You want them to ride momentum. It's a very important thing. And we saw the Mets continue to not take advantage of said momentum after they got curb stomped in Game 2 because Jonathan was rocked across 2 innings. The offense just couldn't retaliate for a second straight day, and that was that for that 10-3 loss. Now, I can't say in certainty that the Mets would take a big comeback victory in stride heading into postseason, but I'm going to go on a limb and say to myself, if the Mets finally do something they haven't done all season long, when they are the only team in the National League, at minimum, that has not won a baseball game to rally back in the 9th inning by down only 1 run or more, I'm going to go on a limb and say that that's really going to bring the team morale up, and that's going to get them together. That's going to get them effing hyped up like we haven't seen yet, and probably have them really amped up heading into postseason play. And that is wishful thinking if they can get there. So, got to attack these pitchers often and early, because you cannot handle Sandy going 7. You really don't want to put yourself in a position where both Perez and Cabrera go 6 at least. You want to try to get them out of there in 5 or so. That would be very ideal and practical for this team. If you can't do it, then obviously you have to try to beat up on a bullpen that's headlined by a young little Henriquez or so, who has been or Hernandez, I'm butchering on the name, on the rookie for the Miami Marlins, who has a just over 2-year reign, 70 appearances this year. He's been nasty, and he carved up the Mets terribly at Citi Field when the Marlins won 3 of those 4 games. The Mets have a tall task in the pitching that they're facing, but like everything else, you just got to swing, you just got to win. That's what the Mets need to do. Either win out, and you are for certain in postseason, win 2 out of 3 and hope that you don't tie the Reds, because if you do, you're cooked. And anything else in between, we will wait and see what happens, everybody. For me personally, this doesn't feel like it's the end of the regular season as someone who's covered every single game this year and spring training, but it is. And if this really is the end of the New York Mets year, and if they do not make playoffs, then I want to reiterate once more, and I will say this again leading into Sunday, depending on the status of the club, I would just like to sincerely thank each and every single one of you who have been by my side, either as new followers, new subscribers, or reoccurring ones throughout the course of the 162. I take a lot of pride, and do definitely never take it for granted. Truly take this with great humbleness, as I say, if that's even a word. I'm very humble when I talk about the platform that we built here, the largest Mets platform, covering the Mets on YouTube from one individual that isn't directly affiliated with the team itself. It's something I'm very, very passionate about that I've done as a full-time job and truly as a passion for a number of years now. And I just can't thank each and every one of you enough for your constant support, win, lose, or draw throughout the season with every single post game we've done, and with these recap videos and breakdowns the following morning, like what you guys are watching currently right here, right now. Because as we get into the offseason, we will still be having updates videos, news-related videos for you guys, but they won't necessarily be the same topics as what we're doing right now, because it won't be in relation to in-season things. It'll be all off-season news, rumors, stuff like that. So to everybody that's followed along throughout the entire course of the regular season, as grueling as the second half has most certainly been, please know how much you're appreciated and how much I sincerely thank you. Now, folks, before I get out of here, what do the Mets need to do to secure postseason fate? You already know the answer because we broke it down. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Your series predictions between the Mets and the Marlins, because as I mentioned, the Mets have Brandon Sproat slotted for Game 1, They have no clue who's going game 2. They have no clue who's going game 3. Could Kodai Senga be utilized in one of these games? It's definitely possible. Anything's on the table at this point. Nothing will get past me with what I may see Carlos Mendoza do, regardless on how much I agree or disagree with it. It's put up or shut up time. It's time for the boys to continue to put up and not shut up and not find themselves how their actual baseball year come to an end beyond this Sunday. Folks, be on the lookout. We will be live covering every single game in a post-game format. We may do a watch party one of these days for one of the final regular season games, either on this platform or on Giraffe Neck Mark's YouTube channel, on his playback, I should say, playback.tv/GiraffeNeckMark. It'll either be that or /WardyNYM. So be on the lookout for one of those. We will have post-game coverage every single game of the series. We will have probably another video or two that drops over the weekend, barring changes. And then beyond that, we will see if we're getting prepped for postseason play or getting prepped to talk about who the Mets need to fire, who they need to add, who they need to trade, and who they need to let go, and everything in between in this offseason coverage. Thank you guys again. And as always, no matter what, let's effing go Mets. Peace out, everybody.